Werewolves is a 2024 American film directed by Stephen C. Miller and stars Frank Grillo, Katrina and Ilfenesh Hadera. The plot here follows the entire planet preparing for a supermoon event where anyone exposed to moonlight will turn into a werewolf. Everyone knows what to expect pretty much because it happened a year before and apparently completely unexpected at that time. And this is kind of the first plot hole for me, not to jump into things a little too quickly, because I feel like that first supermoon should have left the planet just pretty devastated, and things just look completely fine a year later, so I don't know. But anyways, I'm a huge fan of monsters. I love a good monster. I love a good monster design. I love a good monster movie. And I've always loved werewolves themselves as well. Definitely one of my favorite monsters of all time. And like a lot of us, I've always been bummed out about the overall state of werewolf movies, right? The concept to me, is just so cool, if even a bit one-dimensional for the most part. So I think that might limit the genre at times, but we just need some good writers to come up with some more original concepts, I think. And that is kind of a plus here with this film because the concept is a bit fresh for the werewolf genre itself. I mean, okay, let's get this out of the way. I've never seen the Purge movies. I've never seen any of them. I'm aware of the general plot and how Werewolves borrows from it pretty heavily. So here, you have a team of scientists trying to come up with a solution to the supermoon debacle in the form of a medication called, get this, moonscreen, which, whatever, but it's a ointment that you can rub on your skin like sunscreen, I guess, or maybe it's a spray, I can't remember, but anyways, you get the point. I guess I've seen some people say like, "Oh, that moonscreen, that's such a dumb name." But what else would you call it? I mean, I guess it makes sense. You got sunscreen, now you got moonscreen. You got one thing to protect you from the sun. Anyways, so I don't know. I thought that was funny. But if that sounds a little dumb, it's because it is. And this is a very 80s and 90s style horror action film. So your personal tastes will definitely have a huge impact on your enjoyment of this film overall. Personally, I'm fine with that kind of thing if it's done right. And for me, this film misses the mark in numerous areas. That said, there were some things that I liked, about this film, mostly the werewolves themselves. Because with literally any werewolf film, we're mostly going to judge them by these three things. The look of the werewolf, of course, the transformation sequence, and how much CGI is used, throughout. And this film at least passes most of those tests, and I am kind of happy to say that. Now, the look of the werewolves themselves is pretty cool. I dig it. And they look to be pretty much all practical, or at the very least, mostly, for what I can see. There are a handful of werewolves, and what I liked is that they all looked different from each other. They all kept traits of like their human form, and I liked that they didn't just all look the same, right? The transformation sequences I thought they were fine. They are mostly, if not all, CGI, these transformation sequences, but they don't look terrible. Like I've definitely seen worse, and I've seen like this level of CGI in bigger budget movies. So I think that's for the most part fine. I would have rather seen a practical transformation scene, of course, because I think a practical transformation would have been cool to match the practical werewolves. But honestly, I think it's a minor complaint in this case. But then we get to what I didn't like about this film, which is a much lengthier list. So like I said, the plot I think is solid. It totally works. Minus the Purge comparisons, it's unique enough for a werewolf film. Of course, I would have liked to have seen this on a much larger scale, but with a limited budget, I wouldn't expect that. But the limited locations, I think, among other things, do kind of hold it back. Then I have to address the characters and the acting. First, I have to say that it's always cool to see Lou Diamond Phillips. He was everywhere in the 90s, and I always liked him, always thought he was super cool, even though he's basically just a cameo here. Frank Grillo as the lead totally works. I was familiar with his name, but I don't think I've ever seen him in anything necessarily. He's got that John Bernthal Punisher, thing going, and I think he's the best actor here by far. And he is trying to protect his deceased brother's family, and I can get behind that. They do try to inject some emotion into this film, but unfortunately, most of that I don't think works at all. And the performance of his brother's wife was honestly pretty terrible. And for being one of the main characters, it was kind of hard to get past that. I also didn't care for his scientist partner either. Her acting was a bit better than his brother's wife, but still left a bit to be desired. Her character wasn't very interesting either. And then there's Cody, the asshole ex-military dude that lives next door to his brother's family. Motherfucker is shooting military-grade weaponry in his backyard, in a huge urban-type neighborhood, just as target practice. I'm talking, it's such a stupid scene. And he's, of course, a total douchebag. But, you know, at least he probably holds his own with the werewolves, right? Yeah, I don't know. Having a decent lead with charisma often just isn't enough, you know, to make up for the other characters that are just boring. And that's the case here. I personally think this film would have worked best as a straightforward action movie, focusing on action and, you know, the attempts at emotion just kind of seemed forced to me and kind of cringy, really. And I also wish that the death scenes were more like gore focused, but that's just a personal complaint, not really a valid critique. The concept here could have totally, you know, led to a really wild, over the top and epic movie, but, you know, the budget just kind of hinders that a little too much. And at this point, you're probably thinking that I'm missing the point or that I'm being way too harsh here, and I get that. But hey, you know, I'm just describing my experience with this film. I'm giving Werewolves a 5 out of 10, you know, completely average score. I'm seeing a lot of chatter here on YouTube, you know, praising this movie, and I really like the enthusiasm, to be honest, but I disagree, and I see this as a kind of slightly overrated movie that nobody will remember next year. That said, if you're looking for your next Sci-Fi Channel movie to watch, you will probably enjoy this, and I respect that. Hell, I even like that about you, you know? It just wasn't for me. Personally, I'd recommend Dog Soldiers and Late Phases instead. Cheers, guys.